Hello there, welcome to Venture Capital. We are indeed on the road this week. We are filming from St. Petersburg at the G20 Summit, of course. And right now I am stood on the Peter and Paul Fortress. It was built in 1703. It's named after Peter the Great himself. That's the history lesson over with. That happened 300 years ago, but right now I'm going to concentrate on what's happened in the last 2 days, because it's certainly been a busy 2 days, that's for sure. And there was a fear that Syria would completely dominate the proceedings here, but to some extent that did happen, but it didn't completely overtake. There was plenty of business going on too. We had the topics of tax evasion, offshore accounts, as well as that job creation, unemployment, and the BRIC Development Bank. Now, I managed to catch up with the chief of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, and I got her take on the current state of the global economy. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. President Putin mentioned the risk of a sharp crisis relapse. What's been done to prevent that situation?
Well, clearly the focus by the Russian presidency on jobs and growth and long-term financing were very welcome objectives, and I believe that it rallied the leaders around common objectives. Sustainable growth combined with appropriately paced fiscal consolidation, as well as the creation of jobs and a growth that is inclusive. So that's certainly we hope conducive to addressing the crisis risks going forward.
And what about monetary stimulus? Do you think that these measures have run their course and that it simply doesn't work and that we need pain in the short term in order for a healthier
Why would you say that the
term?
monetary policy doesn't work? Because we believe that it has had very positive effects, and certainly seeing the US economy and the Japanese economy pick up as they are at the moment, despite the fiscal policies that are in place and that we would like to see improved a bit. So, no, I wouldn't say that they have not worked. I would say that they have worked, and now it's a question of how they are tapered in such a way that it continues to work without producing negative spillovers that could not be addressed.
Now, I managed to catch up with one of the most respected people at the forum, the former finance minister of Russia, Alexei Kudrin, and he had a completely different take on the proceedings.
The world's economy, its current state, can be characterized as being on life support. Its vital functions are being kept running by the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank and other banks by constant cash injections. This should only be temporary. If a sick man goes through treatment and it doesn't help, there's no point continuing it. There's an ongoing effort now to buy time for reforms and changes. But this will end, and the world's economies will be left to stand on their own feet. Which countries' economies will be able to stand and which ones won't remains to be seen.
Now, it was no surprise then that at the event, the emerging economies managed to come together and actually unite themselves. I'm talking about the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and they managed to lay the groundwork for their BRIC Development Bank. Now, this bank will have initial reserves of $100 billion. The BRICS Bank is set to rival the World Bank and the IMF. China will contribute $41 billion, with Russia, India and Brazil $18 billion each, and South Africa $5 billion. The Russian president used the stage to explain why the bank is necessary.
We hope this bank will increase the stability of the global economic system, which unfortunately is not always predictable and depends on a few financial centers and reserve currencies.
I caught up with Kirill Dmitriev. He's the CEO of Russia's direct investment funds, and I got his idea as to what he felt about the new BRIC Development Bank and the complexities that it may have.
There are different models. There is a model of different countries having different developmental banks. And Neshikano Bank, for example, is a development bank in Russia, very successful. It's showing an example for how you can really grow infrastructure and grow key elements by having a developmental bank. The question is still open about development bank for, G20. How will it work? Is it too many countries working together to make a process very easy, and how decisions are being made? So I think there will be discussions during this meeting campaigns that will address some of those issues.
And what are the main issues, though? Is it location, who's going to be in charge of the bank? All of those need to be decided.
Well, there are many issues. So, for example, there is already World Bank and IMF and a bunch of other institutions. So how is that going to be separate? There is a question of how decisions are going to be made. There is a question of where this bank is going to be focused its efforts. Is it equally on all of the 20 countries, on emerging markets? So there are many issues that I think are going to be discussed. What we believe is actually a less complex way of addressing some of those issues is doing bilateral agreements. So, for example, we created a joint fund with China. We created a joint fund with France and United Arab Emirates. And we believe that some of those joint fund efforts are actually also a good way to address things because it's simpler in decision-making terms.
And would you say, with the climate at the moment, with the emerging economies like we've been speaking about, is timing more important than ever to really kick on with this bank and get it in motion?
Well, I think maybe, but then there are other things that can be done. For example, we are proposing the plan that includes 3 simple steps. Reduce restrictions on capital flows, encourage private capital to go into infrastructure, make infrastructure investment more efficient. If you do those 3 things, we believe world economic growth will go up by 3%. And we have some specific ideas. So I think developmental bank is part of the solution, but really biggest solution is focus on infrastructure investing, ensuring that we invest in our future. And the whole world faces $60 trillion of infrastructure needs until 2030. Where do we fund this money? How do we fund this capital? Developmental bank may be part of the solution, but definitely cannot be the complete solution to this.
And with much of Europe's unemployment now at record highs, jobs creation became another topic of discussion at the forum. I asked Alexander Shorhin, the president of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, what measures are needed to put more people into work.
Part of our recommendations related with job creations. We believe that flexible labor market, quality of labor force, education system must be improved very sharply just to see economic growth with new jobs.
And just lastly, I want to ask you about Russia's unemployment, because Russia's obviously maybe in a more enviable position when talking about job creation and unemployment. Would you say that when you compare it to the likes of the Eurozone in particular?
Yeah, in comparison with Eurozone, we have brilliant situation.
But what are the challenges?
Unemployment is about 5%, but at the same time, in this country we have very huge lack of qualified workers, and this lack is the main obstacle for economic growth.
All right, now I might be in St. Petersburg at the moment, but I'm not letting Mr. Sean Thomas off the hook. He is our in-house investor. He has $10,000 US, or at least he did when we first started out with this process just over a month ago. Let's check in with Sean now. Hi, Sean. So tell me, what have you been up to this week? What stocks are you really focusing yourself on? Give me your details, what you've been up to.
As soon as you left for St. Petersburg, everything in Moscow became gray and cold and rainy. So that's the bad news, is you need to come back here so that it warms things back up. Kind of tricked you there. Now here's the good news. The good news is that, remember last week we were talking about oil, specifically Rosneft. Well, while oil, in fact, this is crazy, immediately after I made that decision and invested in oil, I went home and I was all happy about that. And then I heard news that because the UK decided not to go into war in Syria, that the oil prices actually dropped and stabilized, which is not good news for me. It's good news for Syria, but it's not good news for me trying to make money. But despite that, Rosneft inexplicably gained 6%, so I was able to make some money there. Also, I kept a little bit in on this idea that Aeroflot budget carrier is going to catch on. That went up 1%. So overall, Katie Pilbeam, I have gained. So now, okay, I went from 8,825 added $547 to that. Now I'm standing at my grand total, $9,372.15. Also, I'm hearing from the news standpoint that China and Russia are making movements towards this gas pipeline between the two countries. So the energies is a way to go. So I'm going to basically get out of the Aeroflot industry. That only went up 1%. I'm going to stay with oil and energy, specifically with Rosneft, and try and maybe diversify just a little bit, go into Gazprom as well. And that way I can kind of try my luck.
Thank you, Sean. Looking forward to chatting with you next week when I'll be back in Moscow in the studio. For now, it's time for me to say goodbye from here in St. Petersburg. I'll see you next week. Different place, but same time. So see you then.